The old farmhouse had survived storms, droughts, and decades of loneliness, but nothing had prepared Rowan Mercer for the black luxury car that rolled onto the dusty driveway that warm spring afternoon. His 6-year-old daughter, Ivy, tightened her tiny arms around his neck as a woman dressed in an elegant white suit stepped out, her eyes filled with sorrow instead of pride. She wasn't carrying lawyers, police officers, or foreclosure papers. She carried only a worn leather journal, trembling hands, and a sentence that would change 3 lives forever. She stopped a few feet away, lowered her head with quiet respect, and whispered that her father had died, but she had come to pay his debt. Rowan stared in complete silence because the man she was talking about had disappeared nearly 20 years ago after destroying his family's future. The last thing Rowan expected was for that man's daughter to appear at his broken farmhouse asking for forgiveness he had never imagined giving. Before we continue, if you believe kindness deserves a second chance and that even broken hearts can heal, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Morning sunlight painted the countryside in golden colors while birds filled the quiet air with songs that almost made the world feel peaceful. Yet Rowan's life had become a daily battle since his wife passed away from cancer 3 years earlier. Every sunrise meant another struggle to provide food, keep the farm alive, and raise Ivy with enough love to hide the emptiness left by her mother's absence. His small vegetable farm barely earned enough to cover bills. Every fence he repaired, every seed he planted, and every late-night bookkeeping session reminded him that survival depended entirely on his tired hands. He had stopped dreaming long ago. Dreams belonged to people who had time for hope. Rowan only had time for responsibility. The woman standing before him introduced herself as Celeste Ashcroft, the CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing renewable energy companies. Newspapers described her as brilliant, fearless, and impossibly wealthy. Yet nothing about her expression resembled the confident executive shown in business magazines. Her eyes carried years of silent guilt, as though she had inherited not only an empire but also a burden too heavy to escape. She explained that while organizing her late father's belongings after his funeral, she had discovered the old journal filled with names, places, and handwritten confessions. Among them was Rowan's family. Decades earlier, Celeste's father, Victor Ashcroft, had been Rowan's father's closest friend. Together they dreamed of building a farming cooperative that would protect struggling families from losing their land. Rowan's father trusted Victor completely. When financial trouble arrived, Victor secretly borrowed money using forged documents connected to the cooperative before disappearing to begin a new life in another city. Rowan's father was left carrying impossible debts, public shame, and the collapse of everything he had built. The pressure eventually broke him emotionally. He died believing his closest friend had betrayed him for money. Rowan had grown up watching his mother work herself into exhaustion just to keep a roof over their heads. He remembered nights without electricity, winters without proper heating, and birthdays celebrated with nothing more than homemade bread. Every hardship traced back to one betrayal. Every painful memory wore Victor Ashcroft's shadow. Celeste admitted that her father never spoke about those years. Only after reading the journal did she learn the full truth. The final pages were filled with regret. Victor confessed he had spent decades trying to convince himself that success erased his past, but guilt followed him everywhere. He wrote that no amount of wealth could silence the memory of the family he destroyed. His final wish asked his daughter to repay every person he had wronged, even if forgiveness never came. Rowan listened without interrupting. Anger rose inside him like an old fire refusing to die. Money could repair fences, replace roofs, and pay debts, but it could never return childhood memories stolen by poverty. It could never bring back his father or erase the tears his mother cried every night. Ivy quietly rested her head against his shoulder, unaware that history stood before them wearing a white suit. Days passed before Rowan agreed to meet Celeste again. She refused to force anything. Instead, she stayed at a nearby motel, visiting local archives, talking with elderly neighbors, and quietly confirming every detail written in the journal. The more she learned, the heavier her heart became. She discovered that Rowan's mother had secretly sold her wedding ring just to buy medicine. She learned that Rowan quit college because tuition became impossible after the family's financial collapse. Every story deepened her determination. When she returned, she didn't bring contracts or legal teams. She brought old photographs recovered from her father's attic. They showed two young friends laughing in wheat fields, building fences together, dreaming of changing the community. Looking at the faded pictures, Rowan realized something painful. Before greed destroyed everything, genuine friendship had once existed. Celeste offered to repay every documented financial loss adjusted for today's value. The amount reached several $1,000,000. Rowan shocked her by refusing immediately. He explained that if he accepted the money while hatred still filled his heart, it would feel like selling his family's suffering. Healing required something deeper than numbers. Instead of leaving, Celeste asked permission to help around the farm. Rowan almost laughed at the suggestion. A billionaire CEO digging weeds beneath the afternoon sun sounded absurd. But the following morning she appeared wearing jeans, boots, and gardening gloves. She spent hours planting vegetables beside ivy, fixing irrigation pipes, and listening to elderly neighbors tell stories about the past. For the first time in years, laughter returned to the farmhouse. Little Ivy became the bridge neither adult expected. Children rarely understand complicated histories, but they recognize kindness instantly. She showed Celeste her tiny vegetable garden, introduced every chicken by name, and proudly displayed the drawing she had made of heaven where her mother lived among flowers. Celeste often walked away wiping tears from her eyes because Ivy's innocent hope reminded her of everything money could never buy. Weeks slowly turned into months. Local newspapers eventually discovered that one of the country's most successful CEOs had been spending nearly every weekend working on a forgotten farm. Reporters invented romantic rumors and business scandals, but the truth remained far more beautiful. One woman was simply trying to honor her father's final apology. Then disaster struck. A violent storm swept across the valley with terrifying force. Powerful winds destroyed greenhouses, uprooted crops, and flooded neighboring farms. Rowan stood helplessly watching an entire season's harvest disappear beneath muddy water. Insurance covered almost nothing. Years of hard work seemed lost overnight. Without making announcements or seeking publicity, Celeste mobilized hundreds of volunteers from her company. Employees arrived carrying building materials, farming equipment, seeds, food supplies, and construction vehicles. Engineers designed stronger irrigation systems while carpenters rebuilt damaged barns. What would have taken Rowan years to repair was accomplished within 2 weeks. Watching strangers work tirelessly for someone they had never met transformed the entire community. Nearby farmers joined the effort. Families cooked meals for volunteers. Teenagers painted fences. Elderly neighbors shared homemade pies and stories beneath the shade of old oak trees. The farm became a symbol of what people could accomplish when compassion replaced judgment. Rowan finally understood something his father once believed. Wealth itself wasn't evil. Character determined whether money destroyed lives or restored them. One quiet afternoon, Rowan visited the small cemetery where his parents rested beneath simple stone markers. Celeste stood several steps behind, respectfully waiting. Rowan placed fresh wildflowers beside the graves and closed his eyes. For years he had spoken only words of anger whenever he remembered Victor Ashcroft. This time, something different filled his heart. He realized forgiveness didn't erase pain. It released its control. He turned toward Celeste with tears reflecting the bright afternoon sunlight. Without dramatic speeches or grand gestures, he accepted her father's repayment, not because suffering had been forgotten, but because carrying bitterness any longer would only steal more years from the future. Together they established the Mercer Hope Foundation using most of the repayment funds. The organization provided emergency grants, farming education, and financial counseling for struggling single parents throughout rural communities. Instead of becoming a monument to one family's tragedy, the money became a lifeline for hundreds of others facing impossible circumstances. Years later, visitors driving through the valley often stopped at the thriving Mercer farm. They saw healthy fields stretching toward the horizon, children laughing among blooming gardens, and volunteers helping neighbors without expecting anything in return. Few knew the painful history hidden beneath that peaceful landscape. Fewer still understood that it all began with one grieving daughter determined to correct a mistake she never made. Ivy grew into a compassionate young woman who often told volunteers that kindness travels farther than anger ever could. She never forgot the day a stranger dressed in white walked down the gravel path carrying guilt instead of pride. That single decision reshaped countless lives. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Every act of support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world forgiveness is still possible. Special request, please comment with the words, "Kindness always wins, red heart," if you believe forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the rolling hills, Rowan watched Ivy run through the fields while Celeste smiled quietly from the farmhouse porch. No one could rewrite the past, but together they proved something even more powerful. A debt paid with money could repair broken lives, but a debt paid with humility, compassion, and genuine love could heal broken hearts. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance a parent leaves behind is not wealth, but the courage for the next generation to make things right.